easy to keep spending money. I think it's very much human nature to spend money on education as opposed to taking action and putting in some risk.
Let's say that you were looking to add a salesperson or a new engineer to the larger team. What is your kind of criteria to figure out I'm going to hire person A versus person B?
So
Meet Sean Graham, a founder, real estate investor, and registered CPA.
I had a business coach who he told me a while back, he said, I'm going to make millions of dollars simply by being in self-storage. Two things, Sean. He said, one, remove the time frame, remove the 1 year. And then two is that I want to maximize the value of the real estate there.
What's a big mistake that you made that taught you a valuable lesson?
I think.
Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Mike. That was a very kind introduction.
It's nice meeting you, Sean.
Yes, it's good to be here, Arden.
It's pretty amazing. You started your entrepreneurial journey in real estate, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yes, for sure. Okay. I got the itch, the real estate itch, the bug a long time ago, I think after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and that kind of really got my mind going. But real estate was the gateway.
Now, was that like flipping or was that like buying and selling, like developing? What was it?
I started out house hacking. So buying small multifamilies using the FHA loan, very little money down. Fixing them up a little bit, you're raising rents, increasing the value, refinancing after doing a little bit of rehab, and along with the having the wind at my back with interest rates in a rising real estate market as well. That sure helped. Yeah. But that's what I started off doing. So I just wanted to figure out a way to buy real estate and have other people pay my mortgage.
It's a way to do it. I honestly wish I think what should happen, like when people think about things like retirement and, whether in the US, Social Security or other places, it's like, I actually wish part of what people learned is coming out of high school. It's like, okay, buy a property, and like how you could go about that, because I do feel like it's such a great way to wealth. But what did that look like for you? Were you buying a certain number each year? Did you get up to a certain number? Because your portfolio wise, what'd that look like?
Yeah, so I house hacked 3 times. In fact, I'm still in a duplex right now. So I'm sitting in the upstairs unit of a duplex. I'm just at the point now where it's like, I don't even rent the whole thing out. We use it as our house, the upstairs, I use it as my office, and then we Airbnb it as we want, which is
nice.
A little bit it's less of a headache, less overhead for us. I mean, sure, it's a lot of work, but we can it's kind of that 80-20 type of thing where it's like, okay, we can make 80% of what we were by renting it out 20% of the time. But yeah, I've always house hacked. So I would do it, I'd house hack, do it for a year, refinance, stay in another year, and then pull out a home equity line of credit and go buy something else. All right. And then once I'd have a good enough reason, I'd go do it again with another FHA loan because I'd refinanced that at the previous one. And then I'd do it again. And so I did that twice in Chicago, once in Detroit. And then I also was able to buy a duplex with a home equity line of credit through that. So did that for a while, I would say 2017 through 2021. And then since then, I've just focused on self-storage.
How did you educate yourself on how to even approach that?
I'm a big proponent of utilizing the free education, everything that's out there. And so in terms of just absorbing the podcasts, the books, I did all that. I would sit on a lot of it was just like a lot of hard work and hustling. Like I was in Chicago. And so I would commute an hour to and from work on the train. Cause I house hacked, right? The first one, I bought it way out in Forest Park. And so I'd have an hour commute. I'd sit on the train and I would just look at properties the entire time. And so it took about a year of just looking at properties every single day to kind of get that next one. As soon as it came up on the market, I know I'd identify it immediately, go see it right away, put in an offer. And that's how we got the next one. And they didn't even accept my offer right away, but they accepted somebody else. That person backed out. And then I was next in line. And that's happened to me a couple of times. But I think I'm not against paid education. I think paid education is great. But my first step is to get absorb all the free materials that you can before you enter into another sort of paid community and then go from there, right? So like learn what you can, then take the next step up and surround yourself by like-minded people who want to do the same thing, and that will kind of lift everything as well and put you into another class of investors and change your mindset too.
Yeah. I like what you said there because I'm kind of the same way. My logic behind it is that unless I'm ready to take action with the information that I'm gaining, it just becomes just time spent learning something that I never use. So I
Action
always start,
taking is what they call
yeah, so I
it.
always start with the free stuff to get me going. And I'll reach a certain point. It's like, okay, now I need more focused coaching or some like packaged product that gets me there faster. What's your reason for suggesting what you just did?
I mean, I think it's easy to keep spending money. I think it's very much human nature to spend money on education as opposed to taking action and putting in some risk. I think I went to a rich dad poor dad seminar when it was just a free seminar, like when I was in my mid 20s, and it was good in terms of like the educate like I love the book, love Robert Kiyosaki stuff. And then you go to the seminar, and at the time, at least, it was a very big sales push. And so
Mhm.
I would see people who, they're putting their whole life savings into this, this education, and that really it kind of rubbed me the wrong way because, look, I'm not saying it can't work. It could work, and they could get the education. It could be what makes it happen, but at the same time, it's like you could put that $30,000 or whatever it is into a down payment on property
Right.
instead of putting into education for something else. So um, I'm not here to knock anybody or any type of education or system. Like, again, it can work, and I'm sure they've proven it that it's worked for several people. But for me personally, I'd rather take that money and invest it into myself through actual assets and actually taking on some risk as opposed to continuing to educate and educate and educate.
Could you get the education through the actual call it
Right.
risk, what you're doing, and then in that scenario you're motivated to win too. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a planner and I like the idea of some thought, and obviously I know you spent your time, as you said, trying to figure some of these things out as you did them. But yeah, it's like the best learning you're going to get is then, and it's the stuff that really sticks for you, because the other stuff you could read 5 books and you remember 5% of it, but when you actually go and live something, whether it's painful or whether it's the pleasure side of it, that's what stays with you. But I think when you say that to school, I just can't help but think about it in general. I think for a lot of folks, that's the same challenge they face, is they go to school because somebody says they need to get a degree, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're taking anything with them that's actually going to lead to more later. So you may not be knocking school, but I am. I think it depends on how, but I think it's just the nature that that's sometimes what happens. People do it because they believe it's the thing they need to do, not because they actually understand the outcome they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I think there's a big, push, or it's almost, I don't know, kind of trendy to say like, hey, you don't need college or anything right now. And to a lot of degrees, I think it's true, right? Like you don't need to spend a couple $100,000, especially in
Yeah.
student loans, on education that it doesn't do it for you. But I think it can also still be very beneficial from. I think what we fail to recognize, or I did for a while when I'm looking at like the idea of college, it's like, okay, like why would you spend all that money for college? Well, one, you don't have to. There's other ways to go about college and like education. But two, I think there's some intangible things that are unaccounted for, where it's like, hey, coming out of high school, like I wasn't ready to start investing in real estate and do that and getting into all of it. And I agree with you, but also like I think there is a lot of growth during those formative years too.
Yeah, well, some of it's a discovery, because I think in that scenario, sometimes people don't know enough about what they want, and that actually helps them in the discovery of it. So I agree. I think there's some of it. There's relationships that could be beneficial,
Right.
but then I look at it. Look, Art and I, we actually met partially through film school, but at the same time, it turns out we were also working together at Macy's full time. So we knew each other through that. But our
Yep.
relationship might not exist if it wasn't for that combined, thing around it. However, we both came out of film school, and literally our program had just pretty much started transitioning to digital slower than the other college. So by the time we jumped out in the world we jumped into, DVD and Blu-ray at the time, they don't teach you in school. So it was one of those things where we're like, well, like, okay, go figure. There wasn't loads out of that. But again, don't get me wrong. It's like I also made connections through school that got me internships at DreamWorks. So I do think that there's some benefit, but I think it's really interesting for it's a question of how much people spend and whether or not they could get a different return on their investment, I guess, is sometimes how I look at it. But
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree.
so,
I agree. But yeah, like you said, you don't know where those things are going to lead to. It's like,
yeah.
I didn't go to college to meet my wife, but I did, right? Like
Right.
we ended up dating like years later after college, but it was because of
Good point.
that, like that time that, we were friends then, things like that, like your
Yeah, yeah.
business relationship, your business partner. That's not why you went to film school, right? But
Right.
it's interesting how life kind of evolves, and it's the same thing with business too. It's like these things start evolving and becoming. You go from one to another, and that's kind of what's happened to me.
So with that, then what was the next step in your evolution? Because you mentioned it, you went from the real estate, then you got into, you said it was the storage facilities. Was that for yourself or was that for others, or what is that?
Yes. So I started syndicating self storage facilities. Well, I should say I should start out like uh, buying self storage facilities, like with JV partners, joint venturing, and
Okay.
buying them. And so I'd go out, I'd find the deals, I would find the partners, deal with the banks, negotiate terms, the whole 9 yards, underwrite the deals. And my role has always been to bring the deal, the opportunity, do the work in exchange for ownership, while also bringing in partners. So everything I've done real estate
Hmm.
wise has been very high leverage in terms of not me investing tons of money, but it's either like, hey, I find the right deal, house hacking, use a very low down payment loan, which snowballs into something more,
Yeah.
or finding the right opportunity, bringing in JV partners to bring that down payment to help, sign on the note and to help get the deal in place.
So that's interesting there, though, because I do feel like for me, I'll call myself a little more of a late bloomer on that strategy, just because oftentimes when people are younger, I think especially, the leverage, I don't know, maybe we hit a point where people consider the leverage, but then they somehow forget that that's a possibility of using other people's money if you can bring the knowledge, and sometimes not just the knowledge, just the execution, because a lot of people aren't able to educate. And sometimes you may not even have all the knowledge until you start to execute. But Rich Dad Poor Dad, I can only assume, was a big piece of that for you. But when did you finally realize that, oh my gosh, I can do this just fine without having to bring my money to the table for it?
Well, I think that was part of the transition into commercial real estate.
Yeah.
So when I'm looking at I'm going from house hacking duplexes and triplexes using FHA loans, and which was very little down payment,
Uh huh.
right? And to I want to break into commercial real estate. And then how do I do this? Although I don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars saved up to put as
Yeah.
a down payment. And so that's what led to self storage, because basically you can get an SBA loan with self storage.
Uh huh.
And so SBA has pretty high leverage options where you can do 90, 85 or 90% financing. It doesn't work with any other commercial real estate type of or asset class because it's all real estate. SBA doesn't finance real estate. Self storage is a business. They look at it as a business because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And so they're in the business of financing other small businesses. So that when I saw that opportunity, I was like, okay, like this makes a lot of sense. It's simple. It's a simple business. It's very straightforward. It's not too complex. People don't live there. At least they're not supposed to be living there, right? And you can get an SBA loan to finance these things. So it was a lower amount that my partners, JV partners, would have to bring.
Yeah.
Significantly less. So I'm not saying to do SBA every single time forever. Eventually, as we got into syndications, then we started using other types of debt. But again, we brought in investors, and the investors would would, they're really primarily putting down that down payment.
Yeah.
So there's different strategies to get into it, but everything I do, like within business, is about leveraging from a financial standpoint or from even a talent standpoint.
So
Yeah. Can you, I'm very loosely familiar with syndication. Can you kind of describe that and what exactly the process is?
Yeah, so syndication is taking on a real estate project or investment with limited partners, meaning people who they invest their capital and that's what they're risking on in the deal. So, as a general partner, you are signing on the debt, you're taking on the risk, and you're putting together the whole project and you're running it, right? And you're bringing it to fruition through whatever your forecast would be. And you go out and you raise the money. The limited partners are coming in and their total at risk is the capital they put in. So if you're a limited partner, you come in and you put in $50,000. That's what you're risking. 50,000. That's the most you could lose, right? And as opposed to on the general partner side, right, you're signing on the debt. Like if it goes bankrupt, that's on you. And a syndication is just combining those two forces. So it allows general partners, people to get real estate deals done without, putting down all of the money, because we could only go so far. There's only so many deals you could do if you had to put the down payment yourself
Right.
down on every deal. And so the idea is it offers investors and people who they either don't want to do the projects themselves, or perhaps they have a really well-paying W-2 or other type of job or different career, and that's the best use of their time, not going and looking for opportunities. So then they take their capital and they invest it with different syndicators to get a return on it.
And if it's a syndication, don't they also get the tax benefits, or am I wrong?
Yes. So you can get the tax benefits, and that's the cool thing about the like the self storage, right?
Yeah.
Like SBA looks at it as a business, but the IRS looks at it as real estate, meaning you get the benefits of real estate, like
Right.
through depreciation. But yeah, all the net income or the net profit or loss gets passed down to the investors through a K-1.
Nice. And so do cost segregations play a role in there?
Yes, absolutely. So, you can do cost segregations on syndications and really on any type of real estate. But the idea there is that we help accelerate the depreciation of the building. And like the IRS they look at depreciation, right? I guess just for the listeners, like they look at depreciation as this way of really writing down the cost of the building, right? Take out the value of the land.
Yeah.
Land doesn't depreciate. The actual building, they're depreciating it every single year for, let's just say, wear and tear, right? Like things go out of use and you have to replace them. And so there's an expense to that. Well, it's not really like a cash flow expense, right? You might depreciate a building, maybe it depreciates $20,000 every year. If it's straight line depreciation, that's not hitting your bank account. So
Right.
from a lending standpoint, they add that back. They don't say, okay, well, you're broke or you didn't make anything.
Yeah.
They know what depreciation is. But from the IRS standpoint, it helps you lower your taxable income. And so even in the syndication, we can pass those losses down to our investors.
Which can be huge. Again, me having gone through this for my short-term rental, that can be really big, because I'm not saying you're going to necessarily pay for the entire investment, but depending on the investment, you can, especially when you start looking at things like bonus depreciation, get back a large chunk of what you put in for that early on. I mean, it works the same way. I'm just assuming here when we talk about it in your space as well. Is that fair, or there's some differences?
Yeah, there's different rules with depreciation and how it works, and we could get into all of that if you want, but there's different rules in terms of how much you can actually apply to offset different types of income. Like you have active income, which is kind of like your W-2 salary, right? You have portfolio income, which is more about like stocks. You have passive income, which is like real estate. And so in general, like IRS looks at real estate as passive income, and depreciation is a passive loss. And so passive losses offset passive income. There are ways to have the depreciation losses like offset active income,
Mhm.
like W-2 income, things like that. But that's not as common. There's different strategies there through short-term rentals, especially.
Right.
There's a really good strategy, and real estate professional status, things like that.
Okay. So for this situation here with storage units, is that able to go towards somebody's W-2 or no, because it doesn't fit the criteria for like a
So
bonus depreciation?
yeah, so the bonus depreciation would get passed down,
Okay.
right?
Got it.
So the like we do a cost segregation
Yeah.
study, we front load a lot of that depreciation. So we're not waiting 40 years to
Yeah.
take advantage of it, right? We front load a lot of it. It gets passed down through K1s to the investors. Now, for the investors, that's a passive loss, right? And so it helps offset passive income.
Okay.
So let's just say they have a big capital gain because they
Yeah.
sold another real estate or another syndication. And so they have this big passive gain. Well, the K1 from the syndication and the depreciation is going to create a big passive loss. And that
Right.
passive loss will offset that other passive
Okay.
gain, therefore lowering their taxable
So
income. So
it does have to be passive in that particular class of purchase.
yes. So it can be, you can use it to offset active income in some scenarios, but that would be like, like you're a real estate professional and you qualify for material participation rules on the portfolio as a whole. And then, you might be able to use these passive losses to offset active income in that way. So there are different ways of doing it. And there's a number of scenarios, but for most people, it's going to help offset other passive income.
Awesome. So I'm curious for you, was the whole cost segregation the next business you went into, or was it actually VAs before you did that?
It was the virtual assistant. So, I wouldn't say everything's vertically integrated, but it's very much related.
Uh-huh.
And it's the virtual assistants. So I have always run all my companies, like my property management, accounting, acquisitions, like in regards to real estate and self storage, using virtual assistants. So when I say virtual assistant, I think it's kind of a term that brings to mind like, hey, somebody who just does tasks and just kind of knocks things out for you, knocks out a to-do list. But really it can go way beyond that, right? We're just talking about overseas contractors or employees who are able to be significant, roles or departments in your business.
Yeah.
So I started using people overseas talent to manage my self-storage facilities, do all the property management. They can answer phones, they can move people in, move people out, they can run auctions, they can do
Wow.
pretty much anything. They
Amazing.
coordinate with maintenance, coordinate with the boots in the ground. There's very rarely something that they need me for. And when they do, we put in, operating procedures so that they understand how to handle that the next time. In regards to acquisitions, they help me find deals, find self-storage deals, real estate deals. They help build relationships with owners, manage the CRM, outreach, phone or cold email, things like that. And then accounting too. I use overseas talent to do all the bookkeeping. Every single self-storage facility is a different LLC. I have to track it by property. I have to track the holding company. I have to track everything. And then I probably have 10 people who work for me overseas on a full-time basis.
Wow.
And so it's payroll, things like that. But the accounting is a very big piece too. And that kind of leads into like forecasting and finance. Like accounting is more historical based, but then it's starting to do underwriting, analyzing deals, kind of doing ad hoc reports or pro formas to see, is this a deal worth doing? And so we've kind of developed in that way where they're doing really everything for me.
That's
And
pretty
it's not
cool.
an overnight thing.
Yeah.
It's a gradual build up as you build somebody or people's skills up, but it's been fantastic. And so I started doing that for other people as well.
That's great. And where are your VAs based out of generally?
Philippines, which is very common.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt, which is not as common.
Yeah.
India, I have engineers in India. But I mean, we've hired from probably 12 different countries.
Okay. So
sales reps in South Africa, all over.
yeah, country matters less, skill set, and whatever level of English you're looking for.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I think Egypt's been great for like customer service. They have like very good, they have a very high level of English. South Africa is better for sales because it's a native English speaking country,
Mhm.
and it's just like another. It's a little bit um, slightly different than what you'd get out of Egypt. Egypt, I'd say, is better for like customer service, but like sales, I like South Africa. Um, Engineers, I like India. Bookkeeping, CPAs, I like the Philippines, and there's other countries in the Middle East.
Interesting.
So it's all over. But there's a lot of global talent, and kind of go to different places for different things.
How do you manage the time zone difference across all these team members that you have?
They manage it. I don't manage it. So I'm in Detroit. I'm in Eastern Standard Business Hours, but yeah, they work Eastern Standard Business Hours, and I think it's pretty common for people in other countries to work U.S. business hours. It's not like a new thing. A lot of economies kind of rely on the U.S. market and jobs, and they do that anyways, and so that's never been an issue. Now, some people it's like somewhat of a hybrid, like part of the day they're available and the other part they're working on their hours, and that's fine. Like especially in like an accounting role, right? If you're in sales or something, well, you need to be available for U.S. business hours. If you're in property management, you need to be U.S. business hours. But if you're building a website for somebody, like you can pretty much do that on your own time. You don't have to do it during U.S. business hours. So it's role to role.
Yeah. Let's say that you were looking to add a salesperson or a new engineer to the larger team. What is your kind of criteria to figure out I'm going to hire person A versus person B?
So every job role that we place it's a customized process. So whether that's internal or it's external, it's hiring for somebody else. So the first step is getting a job description written down. So either customer has one or creates one, or we do it with you, right? But we both have to sign off on it. Step two is posting job applications everywhere globally. We have a recruitment software that helps us with that, and we post all over the world. We get somewhere between 600 and 1,000 applicants per job post that we have.
Is that like an off the shelf system, or is that something you guys have worked on?
No, it's a applicant tracking system.
Got
So
it.
it's a pretty robust
Yep.
software that's very good at that. And then from there, we do vetting. We've got resumes. We say, okay, we find top matches. Then we can, from there, there's a number of things we can do. We can vet level of English. So for like an accounting role, the level, like the English accent matters a lot less than for a sales role. We can do skills testing. So we use a third-party software to do skills testing, whether that's accounting or finance or anything, just to like kind of back up who they say they are. Like, all right, you say you're a senior accountant. Okay, well, let's just kind of give you some tests to make sure that you are who you say you are. It's not a perfect thing, but it helps kind of vet people. We do personality testing too, so we can test personalities and to see, hey, is your personality in line for this role or to work directly with your potential employer. And then we interview people. We do one-on-one interviews, and so we do all that stuff to kind of funnel down from 1,000 people down to about 3 to 5, and we bring those 3 to 5 people to the interview with the customer. That customer then interviews those people, and they choose who they actually want to hire after one-to-one interviews.
Wow. It sounds like what any large corporation would do when they were hiring. I mean, like when you look at your process at a high level, which is really interesting because I think that's probably why a lot of people face challenges sometimes with their VA experiences is because they're like VA. And then whatever was the first email or something that they got from somebody saying need help as a VA, but then it turns out are. Yeah.
There's a lot of global talent that's not on, the majority of the people we hire, I'd say that 80-90% they're not on Upwork or Fiverr because they're not freelancers. They are employees working at other companies, and we're finding people who are looking for careers.
Yeah.
So
Huh.
it's something you can do it, but it's a lot of work. So that's what we're getting paid to do that work.
So they are then actual employees, or they are contractors? How does that look when they're overseas talent like that?
So they're technically contractors.
Okay.
So we have an agreement saying that they are contractors,
Yep.
and there's certain rules with that, and um, that's what they are. They're
Yep.
not employees, but you don't have to 1099 them. There's a form, I don't remember the name of it right now offhand, but basically says, hey, you have them sign off. I don't live or work in the United States. I don't pay U.S. tax, and so you just kind of keep that on file. It's a form that the IRS has. You don't even have to submit it, but if you were ever asked about it or questioned, that's what you need to show that this person is not a employee and doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
You don't have to pay FICA or tax on it.
Okay, got it.
Anything like that.
Just on this topic in general, because obviously very curious about it. I think a lot of people make a lot of mistakes here. This might be one that's actually worth having you back again to dive in deep just around this topic in its own. So we'll put this one out to our audience. Anybody listening, if they do want to see a repeat and have a conversation specific to this, if you'd be open to that, they could let us know in the comments below if that works. Another question for you, because you had said before that you had, part of being the general partner. It sounds like you had to bring the collateral to that. Is that correct? Or were one of the other partners, limited partners, able to do that?
So the limited partners come up with a down payment.
Yeah, but you're on the hook for collateral as a GM or general partner.
When you say collateral, you're saying like in terms of like the loan, like we're signing on the debt. Yes, yep. The limited partners are not signing on the debt. Now there are scenarios where you need somebody more who has a bigger balance sheet to sign on the debt, and then you'd bring them in. But they're more in like a hybrid role where it's a like a key partner who's not making strategic decisions, but like get more equity on the GP side or get some of it in a limited role just to be able to sign on the debt to get it across the finish line. So that is an option too.
Because I assume that for the SBA loan, sometimes that is what they're looking for, is they want to know, who's covering the debt, and if not, what's going to go up for collateral.
Oh yeah, all the banks want to know who's covering the debt. So you have to have people who have the balance sheets.
Okay, but that doesn't have to be you as a general partner. It could be the limited
partner. Does. So typically when I do the syndications, I'm one of a few general partners.
I see. Okay.
So I'm not the only general partner, and it's not just my balance sheet. I'm signing on the debt, but there are other people, general partners, who are doing the same thing.
Okay. And then for that balance sheet, aside from when we talk about debt, that could either be, yep, look, you see I have the money over here, I'm good for it, or it could be your real estate and properties, right?
Correct. They want to see it's typically a net worth.
So that's where for you, starting off the way that you did and building up, because then you had that, and then later on that then allowed you to have that to continue to grow, because now you had the, we'll call it the debt, the collateral, however we want to look at that, which then lets you keep parlaying into it. And I'm just kind of tracking the footsteps here. You then needed VAs. You said, hey, you know what? I just learned a really good process here. Other people are running into the same problem. I'm going to help them do that. But then along the way, also, you're like, you know what? There's some savvy tax strategies we should be following here, and it's only going to help us also attract good investors. And then you added that one to your portfolio. Is this about right? Is that how it all tracked?
Yes. So I had a business coach who he told me a while back. He said, I told him what my plan was. I said, hey, I'm going to get into self-storage, or I'm in self-storage, and I'm going to make millions of dollars simply by being in self-storage, investing in it, and wholesaling self-storage deals. And he said, and I said, I'm going to do it like in a year. And he's like, all right, that's great. But two things, Sean. He said, one, remove the time frame, remove the 1 year. He said, you're capping yourself. He said, you don't know, it's going to happen, right? But you don't know when it's going to happen. So I removed the time frame, which kind of helps a lot from I would say a mental standpoint. And then two is that it can be related to self-storage, but it doesn't mean it's going to be wholesaling self-storage necessarily. If you only say, hey, I'm going to wholesale self-storage, well, you might miss a lot of other opportunities that are right in front of you. And so I think there's kind of a difference between, hey, I have shiny object syndrome,
Yeah.
and there's an opportunity in front of me that I need to capitalize on, right? And so for me, like shiny object syndrome is like listening to every single podcast out there and then trying to be in every type of real estate asset class because they all sound fantastic. And I'm jumping from multifamily to short-term rental
Right.
to self-storage to long-term rentals. When if I had just focused on one, I'd be successful in whatever one I had chosen, right? And that's a little bit different than seeing another opportunity that's in front of you that aligns with what you are already doing. It's not going out and starting completely over, but it aligns with what you're doing. And so, um, my background was as a CPA. I'm still a CPA in the state of Michigan, and I left. I was in corporate accounting and finance, and I worked for a private equity backed company, and I did all these things. And then I went and I left that, became a full-time entrepreneur doing self-storage and doing real estate. And then through that, right, the overseas headhunting company kind of came out organically. But then also the cost segregation company really was organically built too, because it tied directly back into my background as a CPA, where I was already familiar with tax and depreciation and cost segregation and how all of that worked, right? And investors and helping people take advantage of that. So I was able, as a real estate investor, you do cost segregation studies on your properties, and you get those to pass the benefits down to your investors or take advantage of the benefits yourself. It's the reason that, generally speaking, the wealthiest real estate investors, they don't pay any taxes. It's because they have so much depreciation and they're offsetting everything with that depreciation. But I saw this as a clear opportunity to connect my background as a CPA with the real estate, and that was through the cost segregation firm. So that's it. It's those three businesses. I'm not looking to start a different company every single year, but it's the way it unfolded.
So there's nothing right now where you're like, that one could be cool to do next.
Oh, it pops up all the time. I mean, I guess property management is something that I also do. It's just less of like a forward focused thing where I'm helping other people do it. It's just for the in-house facilities and properties that I have. But there's a lot of opportunity, out there in the world, but I'm focused on building up what I have.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, to your point, if you've got systems in place with a lot of them now, it almost feels like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you if the opportunity struck to keep going down the property management pathway? But your self-control is also appreciated as you're like, okay, because right now, what area are you really focused on trying to grow the most? Do you have a bias towards one right now?
So I look at the real estate and self-storage as an equity play. So I'm building that up in terms of building equity. I'm not focused on it from a cash flow standpoint on a personal basis. That money kind of stays in those businesses.
Awesome.
But I want to maximize the value of the real estate there.
Makes sense.
However, that doesn't pay the daily, monthly bills. And so from that side of things, most of my effort goes into the cost segregation side. So I'll do the cost segregation work, and that's something that's extremely helpful to investors and help them offset their gains and minimize their taxable income. So that's where I spend most of my time. I'm in a few different communities, and I'll go speak at different events or things like in self-storage or in real estate, and talk to people. And then for the overseas headhunting company, most of that business is more organic, where it's people coming in and coming to me and saying, hey, like, I need a hire, heard you're the person to go to. And it's a lot of repeat customers. That's awesome. Customers who are referring other people to us.
That's great. So would you ever, do you have somebody right now that you consider like your chief operating officer, or are you kind of wearing the hats of that role, CEO?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much a visionary when it kind of comes to being an entrepreneur. I'm more focused on like pushing sales and pushing and growing the company growth, and getting things done and bringing in business. And that's my role. However, I handle a lot of like I have the team in place, right? but I'm kind of that ultimate test. So I do have a business partner who helps a lot with the operations as well. So
Okay, got it.
he's an owner with me, and he's also a self-storage investor, and his name's Jordan, and he's fantastic, and he helps run the team as
Yeah.
well. So it's
Nice.
kind of a combination of all of that. But from a technical perspective, right? Like at the end of the day, I'm the one who has the background as a CPA, and I'm signing off on these cost segregation
Yeah.
reports. So like I oversee the final deliverable.
Yeah, makes sense. Gotcha. So I'm curious, from the time that you said to yourself, this is kind of that vision, this future that you want, and the time that you actually left your 9 to 5, how long did that take you?
Man, so I wrote I started investing in real estate in 2017. I left my W-2 in 2020. Yeah, I left it in
So
2020. So it was about
3 yeah.
years there where I was doing it three and a half years. And the plan was to leave my W-2 when the company sold. And then COVID hit and the whole company changed. Everything changed internally and decided to pivot. And then we no longer were selling because of that. And I was actually let go from my job. They said, hey, we don't need you anymore. We're going in a different direction. And that's what happened. And it's kind of amazing because the company, I think it still has not sold. And so I would have been there another
Wow.
3-4+ years, just sitting there waiting to get out and to get my,
Right.
get out
Not
of the
pushed out of the
W-2.
nest.
Yeah. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
I was very fortunate in that regard. It's one of the things. It's like it sucks being fired. Nobody wants to be fired, but at the same time, it was fantastic because I wouldn't be in the position that I am.
Yeah.
And so it was a really good thing for me, and it was a good thing for the company, but it allowed me to go into real estate and be an entrepreneur
Right.
full time.
Because at that point you were doing it on the side, but you were bringing in a level of income. So at that point where you're like, okay, I'm comfortable, or you're like, okay, I got to step it up here in order for this to truly be my gig going forward.
I was just trying to get at we were almost to the point of sale, like very, very close. And so I was just trying to make it through like the next like 6 months and kind of push them through and get the sale. And I had some equity in the company and get out.
Yeah. Okay.
And everything pivoted because of COVID. So that changed everything for me. Yeah. And I wanted out, but after that happened, I sat down and I wrote a few months later. I was in vacation. My wife and I went to Costa Rica, and it was sometime during the COVID years. I think it was like January of 21, and wrote down this like more of an elaborate vision for what I wanted. And although it's not perfect for what I want, like within about 3 years, most of that stuff came true. It's kind of amazing. Like at the time, I didn't have any self-storage still.
Yeah.
And so it was like, hey, I want to own self-storage. I want to operate in this way. I want to use remote talent. I want to, have this level where like I can leave. I'm not in a W-2. My wife's not in a W-2 and things like that. And have a family, and like all that has pretty much come true. We're free of the W-2 world and have a family and everything. Now, the income levels are not where I dreamt they would be at that time, but I think like overall, like the vision there has come true. And so now I'm just at the point where it's like, okay, I got to kind of have to set that next one and figure out what that looks like and what that is.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And again, to your point, as you say, it's like, I know there's whether the income hit the vision. At the same time, here you are with an extra unit upstairs that you could go ahead and use for office. And like so many other people are like, you're living the dream. It's awesome that the way that you're approaching it. And I know obviously you've sacrificed in some ways because, the house hacking piece of it. And okay, I'm sure, right now it's like at different times, or maybe your wife's good, but I know some relationships is harder because people are like, no, where's our own house, without any neighboring or sharing walls, and where we're not operating a business. But I think the buildup to that is what, allows you at a young age, to be able to have so much more freedom with that. So it's an incredible story. And somewhere along the way, you decided to start a newsletter too. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been doing the newsletter for, I don't know, about 6 months now. And so I have a newsletter that comes out every single Friday. And, I'll give it to you so you can share it in the notes if you want. But every Friday. And I talk about I talk about real estate, and I talk about some of it's self-storage related, but I talk about real estate. I'll talk about cost segregation, kind of show an example of a deal that we've done recently, and then a recent hire, somebody that we have placed at another company, and what that looks like. And I post on LinkedIn 5 days a week as well. And so the content kind of plays off of each other from that regard. But I enjoy the newsletter. It kind of helps me gather everything and think about the things that make an impact. And it's I don't know, a little bit of record keeping as well as we go along.
Was this content creation part of the vision that you drafted in Costa Rica, or is this something that just came up after?
No, not at all. The more I go on in terms of building up these businesses, the more I realize that you don't know what will work or when where somebody will be, right, in terms of like them reading something. So the newsletter goes through to all of our emails, right, and people who are on our email lists. But maybe somebody's just on LinkedIn and that's where they see me, or maybe somebody's listening to the podcast and that's where they see me, and or maybe they see me in like multiple different ways or at an event, right? But I think you kind of have to be consistent to get in front of people, and then after people start seeing who you are and what you're about multiple times, and they start to develop some trust and understand what you're talking about, and that's how business comes about. So no, that's definitely not something I pictured doing, but it's something that I decided to take on. It's been a good thing.
It's good. Well, and again, I think I'm pretty sure now, although there's so many ways out there, I think this is how I ended up connecting with you as well, as seeing one of your posts. Yeah, exactly it. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And now we've had a couple of, calls as well. So yeah, it is so interesting. It's like, it's always one of those things with networking. Sometimes people are like, putting yourself out there is sometimes easy, but and actually LinkedIn provides this weird little balance for people, because it's like, people are, I don't know, it's not, I can't say it's not as hard as people think. There's the time and the commitment and those type of things are stuff. Like, I feel like, each day I get somebody else who's, what's the term when they spam? Is it, would you pitch smacked? Is that what it is, or something?
Pitch slapped, I think.
Pitch slapped. That's it. Where they just hit you with like these things about you want to buy, and where I think it's just putting the value and stuff out there. But curious. So for you, if you could go back in time and have a conversation with your, younger self, what advice would you give them? And by the way, it's hard to say when I say your younger self, because there's the part that's like, I'm curious to the person before you started diving into all this, versus young long ago. But yeah, if you had some advice that you would want to give, or somebody who's in a place where you were when you were starting out a little bit more, what would you tell them?
I think something that I've realized more recently is that as an entrepreneur, like, how do I say this? My thought process has always been to reinvest everything back into the business, and reinvest and continue to build and build and build, which is great. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, no one else is going to pay you. And so you have to pay yourself. And it's something that I have personally struggled with, because every dollar I make, I want to go back into the business. And to some degree, that's good, because it pushes you and it makes you, continue to hustle and to push and to grind. But at some point also, it's good to recognize the time that you're putting in. Like, I have no problem paying somebody else what they are worth if they're adding value, but it can be a struggle to pay yourself for that time that you put in. And so I'm not saying, hey, take every dollar of profit, out of the business and do that. But at the same time, don't be afraid to pay yourself a little bit and to budget that in, because if you don't start doing that, then your expenses will always eat up that margin that you could have paid yourself. It's always going to be there. But if you force it, and in terms of like, this is part of the budget and it's part of the actual cash flow, then you'll start making decisions that are a little bit different, and it can be good. So it's a balance, but it's something that I wish I had recognized a little bit earlier.
And if you did recognize that, I'm curious, I'm trying to think about, like, is there a specific action that somebody could take if they're like acknowledging it now, but like what should they do immediately to start helping with that?
Yeah, I think having control of your finances is really big as an entrepreneur. Like, actually knowing what your P&L looks like, not just like, in your head,
Okay.
but like actually knowing what it looks like and
Yeah.
kind of building out a cash flow forecast and statement, like knowing what that looks like, because there's a lot of things that I end up paying for
Uh-huh.
that are really a lot less valuable than money toward, like, that I could just take out and actually pay myself for that time.
Okay.
So it will force you to kind of recognize those things and what they look like. Um, Again, it's not a something where it's like, hey, you should take, you keep reinvesting in your business. That's how you're going to grow. All of my money, I reinvest back into my own businesses. It's not doing stocks. It's either in real estate or into my actual businesses to grow. But at the same time, it's good to don't be afraid to pay yourself. But you have to have a good understanding of what your financial position in order to do that and to make decisions that will allow you to pay yourself too.
And is there a point though, an exit strategy for you on that when you're like, okay, now I'm not worried about that? Like, is there a number you got to get to? Like,
I think I have goals financially to allow me to do things more from a lifestyle standpoint, in terms of, a lot of that really, I'm more of an experienced type of person. So most of that kind of comes down to travel, as opposed to like more material things. But I definitely have goals to get there. Now, I think when I say this too, right? Like, I think because I've been so focused on reinvesting in my business, then whenever it is time to like pay myself something, I have guilt about it. And so I think that's the thing that I could tell the younger version of myself, like, it's not something that I should feel guilty about. In fact, it's something that like, I should do, because if I don't, it's just never going to happen. There's always going to be more and more expenses that creep up magically. It's kind of like that. I don't know what the rule is called, but where the time it takes to do something
Parkinson's
naturally expands into the time that you have. And I think expenses, like finances, are the same way. Like,
Totally.
it will naturally fill up. The margins that you do create, you're going to spend more money, and you're going to, what's that law called?
Parkinson's law.
Okay.
Yeah, we should figure out. I mean, I don't know if we could call it the Graham law. We could figure out how we can tie it over to.
I'm not that smart. No.
No, exactly. The other one. By the way, do you, like, when you think about stuff like Costa Rica, stuff like that, and maybe this is something you're like, as a CPA, I will not say one way or another, but theoretically, when you also have your own business, a lot of the things with travel, there are ways to expense things. Like, say you do interviews in person down there with the team when you're in Costa Rica. Like, do you ever look at your strategies when you plan your vacations and think about it in terms of your business too? Or do you try to completely keep it separate?
No, I think about it for sure. I don't let the tail wag the dog. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it that way, but there will be certain trips that I'm able to expense out, and some that I don't. And ultimately, I want to do what I want to do, go to the places that I want to go to. But there are ways to incorporate business to help alleviate some of those expenses from a tax standpoint. So, but if you have enough depreciation, you get enough cost segregation studies done, then you're going to have so many losses, you're not paying taxes anyways.
That's true. That's a good point. Then you're less worried about that one. Yeah. What's a big mistake that you made that taught you a valuable lesson?
I think quality is something that is at the forefront of my mind whenever I think of, really anything in business, but especially real estate. And one mistake was buying a house that cash flowed very well on paper in an Excel spreadsheet. People like I don't know what the rule is now. It can't be 1% with the interest rates the way they are, but that's a general rule of thumb, right? 1%, meaning, hey, if you buy a property and it makes if you can get 1% of the purchase price or total project cost in monthly rent, well, then you're doing, it'll be a pretty good investment. And I found that to be very true overall. Well, I bought a property, it was in Indianapolis, and it was 2%. Right? I was getting like 2% of the project cost in monthly rent. But in reality, I got 0% because I had squatters, I had, like all types of rehab. to the work that I did. Like I just didn't, it was not a quality property. And so I think, quality, like quality attracts quality. So like, it's always the most difficult customers or clients are the ones who aren't willing to pay
Right.
what the true value is worth, right? They want pennies on the dollar, but they also want all of your time.
Yeah.
And so I try to focus on high quality customers, high quality real estate projects, all of that.
I think that's great advice. It's something I continue to learn and consider. And even when it comes to my vacation rental, at times when people are like, hey, do you offer discounts? Like there's some people who are like, do not ever do that. Now I will admit, and just because this idea, that's going to be the person who might then keeps asking for stuff. Though I do think there's some difference there. And I will admit that if somebody comes in with 25-star reviews and they ask for that, I'm like, all right, now we're talking, because I'm like, I'm buying peace of mind for a small discount for them. But no, I think that's a great point. And a lot of people struggle with that, even with their pricing, because, it's like, well, if I could price this offer in a way that just can attract more people, it's like, yeah, but the people you're attracting now, when you start lowering the price on something that, you can be charging a premium for is really important. And what that could mean for tax benefits and that. But again, I won't even try to take us down that pathway. So for anybody on here who's like, oh, they want to learn more about VAs, cost seg, maybe get involved a little bit more on the real estate front, or just learn from you in your newsletter, how do they reach you?
Yeah, so I'll give you the links to put it in the show notes. Feel free to email me, Sean@mavensuccess.com. And then for any of your listeners or anybody who finds you, I'll put in some discounts as well. Like, so we have a discount for anybody who wants a cost segregation study or wants to hire overseas. And you could go to mavensuccess.com/way, as in, this is the way, your podcast here.
It.
WAY.
I like the tie. Yeah.
Yep. Or mavencostseg.com /way, WAY. So we'll do some discounts for your listeners there. And hopefully you can add them to the show notes, and feel free to reach out and email me or put something, book a call through the website.
Awesome. Sounds good. And again, if anybody's interested in us diving deeper down the VA pathway, please let us know in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much, Sean.
All right, guys. It's great. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Bye-bye.